Hey there, everybody. It's Dr. Nicole, your boundaries and feminine energy queen. So, boundaries, we know they are the key to your well being and your relationships. But are you, like many women, making these common mistakes? I want to tell you about the 7 mistakes that women tend to make when it comes to setting their boundaries. So many of the women that I work with, that I've helped, I've coached, I've counseled, they fall um, into these cracks. Like these are the pitfalls of boundaries. I think we're at the point where we know, for the most part, at least in our minds, we know that boundaries are important, but it doesn't mean that the road is going to be safe. So I want to tell you about these 7 mistakes, especially that women make when making boundaries. Because as I always say, women, we are socialized to please others, to nurture others, to be concerned and care about others. And that's okay. That's a beautiful thing. But we've got to have the boundaries to make sure that it's a healthy balance. All right. So ask yourself, do you fall into these 7 mistakes? And we're going to talk about how you fix or what is the remedy for those mistakes. Okay. Mistake number one that I see all the time is over apologizing, right? So, wanting to set a boundary, set a limit, wanting to say no, wanting to make it clear that maybe you can no longer do something that you used to do, whatever that boundary is, right? The one thing that I see so many women doing is over apologizing. So instead of just making the statement, it's an explanation. It's, oh, I'm so sorry. It's guaranteeing that this will never happen in the future, right? So there's so many ways that over apologizing, it just negates the whole boundary in the first place, right? So what you're basically doing is saying, I don't really, in my bones and my soul and my heart, feel that this boundary is valid. So you're almost invalidating the boundary yourself while you're expressing it to someone else. And what do you think that's going to do for that person? That's going to make them not take it as seriously. Because if you're having to apologize it means you don't really feel that you have a right to it. You don't feel it's valid. And that's going to make the other person, even if they don't do it consciously, unconsciously, they're going to question whether you really mean that boundary or if it's something that they should even respect. That's human nature, right? If you're not feeling it, then the other person won't feel it either. So, what can you do, right? You have to train yourself literally to stop over explaining and stop apologizing. It's the power of the pause, right? You say something and you pause. You don't fill the silence. A lot of times, as women, we want to fill up the silence because we say something and we're either expecting a negative response, we're scared we're going to get a negative response, and we rush in to kind of rescue the situation. So that's what's happening with over apologizing. And the remedy is to pause. Power of the pause. You say your boundary and you don't say anything else. Okay. The second mistake is, and this is huge, failing to prioritize self care. So, one of the benefits of boundaries is that we want to have more time for what's important for us, right? It's the whole idea of learning to say no to what doesn't serve you so that you can come back and say yes to what is important to you, what is a priority to you. But so many women are so used to running themselves into the ground, getting even to the point of burnout because they're doing stuff for other people, that they have not even developed the habit of being able to prioritize self care. And again, it's that old saying, we teach people how to treat us. So the way you treat yourself is how other people are going to treat you. And if other people see that you don't value self care for yourself, then they're going to act accordingly, right? So when you fail to prioritize self care, you're doing a few things. You're signaling to your own brain and your own body that what you need and what you need to be at ease is not that important. You're also signaling to other people that you're willing to ignore your own needs. So hey, why don't they do it as well, right? So when you fail to prioritize self-care, it sends a lot of messages that are not good. So what's the remedy? What you have to do is really come up with a self-care routine. Like it has to become like something that is non-negotiable. That's one of my favorite phrases to women. You have to develop your non-negotiables. So coming up with a routine that you really practice and stick with. And I always say, start small, start really, really small, right? But being able to prioritize some form of self care every single day, doing some meditation, doing some deep breathing, taking time for a walk, going to get a massage, doing something that makes you laugh, doing something that gives you joy, eating an amazing meal and savoring it and being in the moment. It could be so many things, but unless you make it a priority, it's not going to happen. My biggest pet peeve is hearing from women that they're running out of the house without eating. That is the opposite of caring for yourself. Okay. And it helps to, that's one of the ways that we start to erode our boundaries because we end up not having boundaries with ourselves. Okay. The third thing, and this is big, ladies, this is big, fearing disapproval, getting so caught up in your head and overthinking and worrying that when you set a boundary, someone, you're going to get rejected, someone isn't going to approve of it, and then that just shuts the whole thing down. You start overthinking and you get paralyzed to where you're scared to even tell the person, the people, whoever it is, that this is boundary is important to you. So you don't stand up for yourself. You are scared of how people think of you, what they're going to say, how they're going to react, and it can cause you to just hide and retreat. Or sometimes what happens is we fear disapproval and we get so extreme and we just like, I call it going ballistic with boundaries, saying no, 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 but in a way that's like so harsh, right? So when you are becoming more secure in yourself and what you need, what serves you, what you need, what you want, you don't have to over explain, and you don't have to be a bulldozer with your boundaries. You can just state what you want, state what your boundary is, and keep it moving. And try to learn to not focus so much or not predict how they're going to react. A lot of times it's a prediction, right? We think this person is going to disapprove. That could be all in our minds, right? But either way, as we say, what someone else thinks is really not my business. So getting caught up in the disapproval of others is really a habit that you have to get out of. And it's through practice. It's through training yourself, self talk, telling yourself and training yourself that what other people think or the reaction is their business and not yours. Okay. So the fourth mistake that so many women make is that they fail to be clear and specific in the ask, or we can call it in the ask, because setting a boundary is a form of an ask, right? You're letting someone know what is important to you, what your limits are. And sometimes you need to ask. You need to ask, like, a form of boundaries could be asking your spouse for help, right? And that could be because you can no longer carry the burdens and that you've been carrying. You can't do it all. You can't be the superwoman. You need to ask for help. That is a form of setting boundaries. But sometimes we're not clear and specific. I've seen so many women who are just like, I'm fed up. I need him to help me. Okay, we get it, sis. You're fed up. But what specifically do you need help with? Can you verbalize that? Can you articulate it? Can you say specifically, do you need help with the nighttime routine with the kids? Do you need help where you have your spouse take care of the kids and you get a day, a 1 or 2 days, however so often, to do your own self-care day? Do you need help in working on things on your business? Like, what is it specifically that you need help with? Do you need financial help, right? Being clear and specific with people is one of the most loving things that you can do for a relationship, especially a relationship that you value. If you have a friend and you want them, if you notice that they're like always asking you for stuff but never there for you, you need to be clear and specific. In this friendship, I need reciprocity. I need you to be able to answer my call when I'm in, when I need someone to talk to. I need you to be able to find other people to ask for money besides me, right? I'm just giving some examples of how there's a difference between saying specifically what you need and just being fed up and saying, I need you to help me, or I need you to stop, you know, stressing me out. You have to be very, very specific. This plays a part a lot in the workplace as well. I've heard people talk about wanting to negotiate in the workplace or wanting to communicate with their coworkers, their supervisors, whoever it is, the people they're supervising. One of the rules of management relates to boundaries, right? Of course, I see boundaries in everything, but it's about being clear and specific about what you want from the other person. Okay? Clear and specific. So practicing that, writing down what you want as you go into a conversation or as you go into any kind of, sometimes you can think of these as negotiations, right? Like what do you want to walk away from the conversation with? And if it's someone that you're in a relationship with, or you're in a friendship with, or it's a family member, and you really want them to know what's important to you, that might be what you want to walk away with, is for them to understand how you've been feeling, right? You need to be clear and specific about what you want out of certain conversations and certain interactions, okay? The fifth mistake that so many women make is ignoring red flags, going above and beyond for people, sometimes people that we just met. Okay, this is a situation that it happens in a lot. A woman is getting into a relationship. She meets a man, she's getting into a relationship, and she feels that the best way to show her interest or how she feels or what she wants, I mean what she can, her love, her personality, whatever she feels is good about herself, she feels the best way to do it is to overgive. The best way to show that to the other person is to overgive. But what that does is it clouds her judgment, because the more you give, the more you get invested in the fantasy of that person, right? And that clouds your judgment to where you don't pay attention to the red flags. Most women see red flags. That's not the problem. The problem is whether or not they're willing to pay attention to the red flags. All right. And so ignoring red flags really encourages us to overgive and to ignore our boundaries. And this even happens even outside of romantic relationships, right? It can happen in your friendships, it can happen with your family. When there might be that family member who does not always, who's always calling you only when they need something, or they might be calling you one or two times, and then the third time they call, they're about to ask for something, right? You have to be aware of the pattern so that once they ask you, and if you know that's not something you're willing to do, you can be okay, you can be prepared to say no. But sometimes we ignore the patterns and all of the red flags, screaming that this person is only calling me because they need something, not because they really care, and then we give in to their requests, right? So it happens in so many different situations where ignoring the red flags makes us ignore our own boundaries. All right, so what is the remedy? One thing to do is to, again, pause. Listen to your gut. Listen to your inner knowing. This relates, ladies, to the feminine energy. Listening to your inner knowing. When you know that going back to the first example of you're getting to know someone, getting into a new relationship, you want to get married, whatever the case is, you know almost immediately what that person's red flags are. So even if you're not, some women say, well, I might have noticed one or two red flags, but I just wanted to, see if it was a pattern. Okay. You have to train yourself to literally write down what those red flags are. So give voice, give a name to those red flags, write them down, and train yourself to stop over giving, especially when you notice the red flags. Ladies, a man can get to know you without you going above and beyond and trying to prove your worth, right? Slow down, have some boundaries, back up, and take note of the red flags. Sometimes not every red flag is like a sign that it's over or it can't work, right? Sometimes you have to talk about what you notice as a red flag. But first you have to allow yourself to notice and acknowledge those red flags. Okay? Mistake number 6. So these are the last 2 mistakes that I want to talk about. Number 6 is letting guilt stop you. I can't tell you how many times I talk to women and they say, but I feel guilty. I feel guilty about saying no. I feel guilty about not, stopping everything and being there for my friend because she's going through yet another breakup and she needs me to be up all night listening to her because she's going to be sad, right? I feel guilty about not, once again stopping everything to go to that auntie's rescue and give her money so that she can yet again mismanage it, right? There's a lot of things that we feel guilty of about because we are so used to being the fixers, especially if you are that responsible person in your circle, right? We're so used to being the fixers and the ones who make everything right that we feel guilty when we don't even have to completely stop it to feel guilty. When we just pull back a little bit, we start to feel guilty. Okay? I want to assure you that the guilt is normal. The guilt is normal. You have to be willing to set the boundary, stick to the boundary despite feeling the guilt. The guilt just means that you care, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the feeling. It's what you do with it. So if you allow the guilt to stop you, you're back at square one, right? And you are continuing to train people to not listen to your words and to just know that you're going to do it anyway, right? Anybody who has kids knows that kids will keep asking and begging you and pushing that boundary. And if you give into that, it only sends the message that it doesn't matter what she says because we can just keep pushing until she gives in, right? So letting the guilt stop you looks like not sitting in the discomfort. We have to allow ourselves to sit in the discomfort of the guilt. And then the guilt eventually will pass. The main thing is that we set the boundary. Okay. Um, I love this saying from a Gabor Mate book, uh, When the Body Says No. It is much better to say no and feel guilty than to say yes and feel resentment. Okay? So don't be afraid of the guilt. It's just a feeling, and a feeling can't hurt you. But what can hurt you is constantly giving in, not setting boundaries, allowing people to manipulate you, allowing people to gaslight you and try to, exploit you into doing things that you don't want to do. Okay? And sometimes it's the people closest to you that will engage in that. And the seventh mistake that I see so many women make when it comes to their boundaries is not being consistent. Not being consistent. Okay? So you set a boundary one time, maybe there's one person, there's a friend, or it could be your partner, it could be, whoever it is. Sometimes there's that one person that we might set one boundary with. They might push back and get angry. One of the things that women fear a lot is that they'll be rejected, or that a person will get angry and withdraw from them, right? And they'll feel, the woman setting the boundaries will feel rejected. And so then what happens is you're not consistent, because you don't like the feeling. You fear, again, back to that fear of disapproval. But what's most important is boundaries, like any other thing in our physical life and even in our emotional life, it requires practice. You're building a muscle. You literally have to envision that you're building a boundaries muscle. Okay? You're building a boundaries muscle. And it only happens through practice, through consistency. Just like when you're working out, you can't go to the gym one time, lift a few weights, and be like, oh, wow, where's my muscles, right? It requires the consistency, the practice, and being very intentional, right? And sometimes we'll mess up. It's okay if sometimes you end up, you told yourself, hey, it's Saturday night, I'm staying in, I'm doing self care, I'm not going out. One of your friends calls you and tells you, starts talking, they really need to talk. Okay. If you find yourself getting wrapped up, drawn in, you end up being on the phone longer than you wanted to, you didn't want to spend all that time, but you didn't say no, or you didn't say, I don't have time right now. That can make you feel like you're failing at boundaries, and you're not. One of the key things is noticing where maybe you didn't uphold your boundaries, and knowing that there's always an opportunity to do it a little bit differently the next time. The key is not to give up, and to forgive yourself, and to be consistent. Okay? All right. So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. We know that boundaries are the key to your well-being, your relationships, what you the way that you communicate in your relationships, right? They are the key to your well-being. And if you keep practicing them, if you're aware of these mistakes, you will be well on your way to building healthy boundaries, having healthier, more fulfilling relationships, and actually protecting your feminine energy. All right, everybody, until next time, I will see you on the channel. Take care. Don't forget to hit that like button, share, and subscribe to the channel.